Hi, Claudia.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Christine Commerce. Welcome to our webinar, Beyond the Game, the Hidden Reality of Human Trafficking at Major Events. My name is Christine Commerce. I am the Program Director for the Alliance to End Human Trafficking. We are a survivor-informed organization that works to end this atrocity by providing educational resources, giving presentations, raising awareness, and engaging in advocacy across the nation. We also support survivors of human trafficking and healing and thriving through financial support of our member houses and by providing educational scholarships. The purpose of our webinars is to educate participants on this issue so they will leave with actionable ways to help identify ways that victims can safeguard our communities and members. And our webinars are free, but donations are always appreciated. You can donate and find out more information about our organization and this issue at alliance-to-end-human-trafficking.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel, where you can find some of our past webinars on many other topics surrounding human trafficking. So please join me in welcoming our guests. Our first guest is Doug Gilmer, who is the president and founder of Resolve Strategies, a global justice solutions group that addresses various forms of human exploitation around the world. A 35-year law enforcement veteran, with the last 25 years being with the Department of Homeland Security. He finished his federal law enforcement career serving as a senior advisor and the senior law enforcement liaison at the Department of Homeland Security's Center for Countering Human Trafficking in Washington, D.C. He has received numerous awards and recognition for his work, including the William Wilberforce Lifetime Achievement Award, and previously led the investigations at the 2022 International World Games. Next, we have Noel Thomas, who stands as a visionary leader driven by an unwavering dedication to eradicating the scourge of human trafficking through pioneering technological solutions, with a multifaceted background deeply entrenched in identifying organized crime, orchestrating law enforcement coordination, and advancing technological innovation. Thomas's journey commenced amidst the mission fields of Operation Mobilization and Youth with a Mission, where he bore witness to the harrowing impact of human trafficking on vulnerable communities worldwide, that led him to serve as the former statewide counter-trafficking coordinator for Florida. He also founded Dark Watch, that empowers businesses to track and monitor trafficking activities, ensuring the safety of customers and communities. Central to his mission is a vision for a world where every individual is valued, protected, and liberated from exploitation. A vision rooted in his deep faith in Christ and his steadfast commitment to setting the captives free. And last but not least, we have Claudia Villa, is an international safeguarding specialist and consultant with experiences working with major event organizers, international sport federations, and serves as head of safeguarding at the Center for Sport and Human Rights, and is part of the Council of Europe pool of international experts on safe sport, as well as the International Safeguards for Children in Sports Working Group. Claudia's approach to safeguarding is rooted over 2 decades of dedicated service to children affected by trafficking, abuse, and exploitation. Her strategic leadership and collaboration with local and national governments, law enforcement, security services, health, and education sectors have influenced critical policies and procedures on the prevention of child sexual abuse and exploitation. She is also a recognized humanitarian sector expert, leading and developing support services for refugees and asylum seekers at both the UN Migratory Agency and British Red Cross. Her passion and dedication in this field has been recognized with the Queen's Award. So welcome to all of our esteemed guests. So glad to have you here for this conversation. And I'd like to start off with Doug. So Doug, could you share a little bit about your work with the World Games and any insights on how these large sporting events, such as the FIFA World Cup, can drive demand?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2022, the city of Birmingham, Alabama hosted the 22 World Games. Um, the World Games is an official International Olympic Committee event. So it's held every 4 years at the midpoint between Summer Olympics. It's a large event. It's where the IOC they introduce new sporting events for inclusion into the Olympics. They're Olympic qualifier events. It was a big deal. Um, and we were anticipating about 500,000 visitors, 10,000 international athletes, their coaching staffs and family members and all of that coming into Birmingham. And so we organized what amounted to be a 30-day um, anti-human trafficking event surrounding the World Games. Um, we began our operations, you know, law enforcement operations 2 weeks before, and then ran them for the entire 2 weeks of the event. But really, it was about a 3 or almost 4 year planning cycle, because we knew that we had to educate people, going into this to the realities of what human trafficking is, kind of the intersection between human trafficking and large scale events. We didn't want to create a more, like a moral panic situation. We wanted to get the truth out there. And so we were very intentional and very deliberate in doing that. Um, we were also up against, kind of to the second part of your question, we were up against some of the misinformation, right? So I think it was 2011. USA Today interviewed somebody from an NGO somewhere who said that the Super Bowl was the most trafficked day of the year, right? And that made USA Today, made all of the media outlets. There was no evidence to back that up, but it was a sensational headline and it stuck, and it that myth has kind of perpetuated. Um, and I think what we know is that human traffic or large events, it doesn't matter if it's a sporting event or it's a large convention, a trade show, the data shows that they're all really about the same. They create an environment in which trafficking can flourish. They don't create trafficking. Trafficking already exists. And the data shows that trafficking already exists in those communities where there are these large events. It just creates an opportunity where trafficking can flourish because you have an influx of people, disposable income, lowered inhibitions, a lot of different aspects that feed into that. And then of course you've got traffickers who are wanting to, make money. And that's what it's all about. So it's a great environment for them, for them to come in, and kind of perpetuate or increase, their presence, that type of thing, surrounding those events. It doesn't create human trafficking. It just creates an environment where it can flourish more easily. But we also have to be very careful about looking at the numbers. Because usually after these large events, there are always reports of X number of arrests, and that kind of thing. And that could make it look like there's a huge inflation. But at the same time, you also have in the World Games, we had a 30-day operation that we were running 18 hours a day, where we had dozens of law enforcement officers who were doing nothing but working counter trafficking for 30 days. When you have that kind of intentionality from an enforcement standpoint, you're going to have increased numbers of cases, and arrests, whether the prevalence of the crime is actually greater or not.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think there is often the misconception that you know, trafficking, increases or only happens at these events. And while there may be more demand, or maybe some of the more victims are brought into these situations to meet that demand, it happens every day in every city, everywhere, right? So, um, I think that's, and there's also more awareness, right,
Right.
around these events, not just the law enforcement. I know, for example, our organization has done a lot of awareness campaigns and so forth, and education, especially in Philadelphia for the FIFA games, and and so I think that also maybe helps the public, keep an eye out of anything that's suspicious to report and so forth. So thank you
Exactly.
for sharing that. All right, so let's go on over to Noel. Noel, can you share a little bit how you got involved with this work? What inspired you to tackle this cause, and how does Dark Watch play a role with this when it comes to people who may be staying at hotels during large events or even throughout the year?
Oh, great question. So for me, it's very personal. For those of you that know my story, and now for those of you that don't, my sister was nearly kidnapped as a child. Our family is walking in this indoor market. She's 4 years old at the time. Dad gets bumped. When he looks down, my sister's gone. Thankfully, he trusts his instincts, runs towards the exit of this building, and a man we didn't know was walking out the door with my sister, and he recovers her at the last second. So, I mean, this is such a small percentage of the type of things that go on with this, but experienced that at 8 years old, and then fast forward, I saw human trafficking firsthand in India. 14-year-old girl that was being sold right above a police station. The police were actually the tail. And it was that quote by Ed Burke where he said that all it takes evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. So that started a career in the nonprofit and everything you talked about. But there was a huge gap that was missing that we saw, and we work and continue to work very closely with survivor-led organizations on the rehabilitation, which I got to thank you and others that are on the front lines, because that is the hardest part of the equation is restoring life to these survivors and giving them the skills. So thank you for that work and everyone on this call who's doing that, because it's so vital. And we were asking the question, where do we fit in this piece? Because everyone has a role to play, and we're all stronger together in this chain, right? So for us, it was how do we provide the technology to support law enforcement and more recently commercial organizations to detect human trafficking. So what Dark Watch is, former guy from the CIA and others that care really deeply about making the world a little safer place. And our technology helps stadiums and hotels and casinos to know who's coming onto their property with a privacy forward risk insight. And what this does is that it helps these brands identify if known human traffickers or other threats like terror and these other kind of worst of the worst actors are coming, giving them a look, and then it creates a grid of information sharing where people can share insights on, hey, I've seen this trafficker at this property, and so we hope that this technology is just one of hundreds that other individuals and innovators come forward with, because there's so many aspects of the human trafficking chain that need to be broken. And but that's the very small piece that we play in helping identify potential human traffickers before they act at live events and hospitality specifically.
Yeah, that's amazing. And technology can be used for both good and bad, as we see, right, with everything else. So we're definitely grateful that you're using it for good, to catch some of the bad actors. And it's so helpful because it is happening in the hotels. And I was just actually at a conference. It was even a child and youth safety conference, and someone was sharing with me because I had my booth set up there that they had thought they were seeing a trafficking situation with these three young girls getting out of a car dressed a certain way, but didn't necessarily do anything about it. He just thought, oh, that's trafficking. But I think, like you said, so it's either people are complacent, and they just are looking the other way, or they don't know what to do. And if they recognize it, well, what am I supposed to do in this situation? And so I think that's the way that people sometimes fall through the cracks. But
Mhm.
let's let's go a little bit different direction now. So Claudia, I know we usually hear about sex trafficking when it comes to a lot of these large events and sporting events. And thank you, Claudia. Claudia is unfortunately feeling under the weather today, and she still joined us, so we really appreciate it. She has to go off camera for a second. It's okay. But Claudia, can you just share a little bit about uh, um, how these large events and sporting events also contribute to labor trafficking and what happens there when it comes to these large events with labor trafficking?
Yes, thank you. So when we talk about major sporting event, there is and other major events like concert or other things. There is a tendency to focus on sex trafficking, but labor trafficking and exploitation is also a major factors that happens around these events. And we can see a large movement of population in the construction industry, in the hospitality industry, catering, and domestic service that are often missed as they are considered the norm, as you're expecting an increased movement in construction, for example, if a new stadium is being built, or in the hospitality industry. So we need to look at those other areas and ensuring that we don't only focus on sex trafficking, but also the labor side of it, and also the hidden side of exploitation. For example, drug dealing, drug exploitation. So how does that work within the hidden industries of the trafficking arena? Also, I want to introduce a concept that come from Mission 89, which is an organization that works in human trafficking in sport. And they have identified three different types of human trafficking in sport, which is trafficking in sport, so is the direct exploitation of athletes, where athletes are being exploited for their wages, so that they sign an exploitative contract. There is no payment of their wages, or they are led by debt bondage with their exploiter, and there is a control of movement of the athletes. Then we have trafficking through sport, which is when sport is used as a mechanism for trafficking. So athletes are being suggested that there is an opportunity for a trial with a team, but this is not real. They offer a fake scholarship. They offer a visa that is not for the reason why they are traveling. And then once they get to the place where they are told, or a different place, they get exploited, but the exploitation doesn't happen in sports. So instead of the athlete being exploited through their contract and through them playing and being part of sport, this exploitation happens somewhere else, for example, in the construction industry or in the hospitality industry. And then we have trafficking around sport. So these notions is where exploitation is created by the event ecosystems, and where we see exploitation in the hospitality arena, in the informal economies, like I was saying, like drug dealing, sexual commerce, and construction. So those three types of trafficking in the sport ecosystems are identified, and it's very important that we recognize them to then inform our response.
Thank you so much. And that's also a great reminder because oftentimes we do only think about the victims that could be potentially being sex trafficked to meet, the demand of people who are attending the games, but we don't always realize that the athletes could be trafficking victims as well, in addition to the people who are working around some of these events. And so thank you for bringing that to our attention
And
also.
sorry, Christine, I just wanted to add, I've
Yeah.
forgotten, but this is really important. What's really important as maybe to highlight as best practice is that the FIFA World Cup 26 Human Rights Framework is the first framework ever for a major sporting event that explicitly prohibits child labor in tournament operation, as this has been recognized as one of the potential opportunity for exploitation. So if anybody on this webinar want to have a look, I think it's publicly available. So the human rights framework for the FIFA World Cup 26 explicitly prohibits child labor, and astonishingly is the first one.
Yeah, and I think that's so great because the more awareness there is of these issues, I think the more that we're going to see some of these resources and more people paying attention to the different types of trafficking that can happen around these events, and then taking a proactive role in how they can address that. So obviously, first it's recognizing that it's a problem at all, and then taking the steps to implement the procedures and the policies on how can we address this. And I think that's so great. I didn't realize it was the first time it was really being addressed. I did hear that they were trying to address it, and we actually also released a toolkit. I'm happy to share when we do our follow-up email with the recording. I will share our toolkit. And if any of our speakers have resources they would like to share as well, we'd be sharing that with our audience in that follow-up email. So let's talk a little bit about if there's any shifts. So we've seen, right, one of the shifts that we could see with is education and recognizing that child labor and labor exploitation is part of these large gatherings. Any other shifts in these trafficking patterns that you have seen in recent years tied to large gatherings, whether sporting or just large events in general?
So is this question for me?
For anyone, feel free if anyone wants to jump in.
I can start, and then maybe
Yeah.
my co-webinar presenters can join in. So definitely a shift in digital recruitment is one of the major one that I've seen happening. So traffickers no longer have to be physically present to the event to identify and groom potential victims, and social media platforms are used as a recruitment environment. So geographical access to an event is not required for initial contact, and that increases the net of the trafficker. Also, um, as I mentioned, the three different type of trafficking. So trafficking around sport is now like a formal concept and a categories, and it would be very useful to collect data around this different type of trafficking to go further and design our prevent and response mechanisms towards those type of trafficking. As what I've seen is that human trafficking in sport is often not identified as in sport, as people are trafficked for other reasons. So they're identified in labor exploitation, not sport traffic. Not the sport trafficking dynamic is not represented, unfortunately. And also there is institutional gaps between sport governance and anti-trafficking actors that has been now recognized. So we see that sports bodies don't see any, or are starting not to see trafficking outside their remit, but they are becoming responsive and ensuring that this is part of the safeguarding plan. There is still a lot to be done yet because it's not there, but there is a conversation that is happening about what should sport bodies do to prevent and respond to identified trafficking. So it's not just a law enforcement matter or immigration matters. There is a willingness, or there is discussion around cooperations. Whether the cooperation is actually happening, we don't know yet, or I have seen it in some occasions, but not consistently. But is a shift that is happening and is hopeful. And I leave maybe others to add something else.
Yeah, I would add, from a labor trafficking standpoint, in the past, there's been a lot of discussion, about labor trafficking related to FIFA, World Cup, the construction of stadiums, that kind of thing, in particular overseas. Um, but even, but I think domestically, where we have a lot of that infrastructure already, um, we're seeing more instances of labor trafficking, probably not within secured areas of, the venues of the events where people have to be specifically badged or vetted, but in maybe outside roles, custodial roles, picking up trash, cleaning bathrooms, that kind of thing. And I know we've seen patterns where organizations who purport themselves to be human service organizations, where maybe drug and alcohol treatment programs, that kind of thing, faith-based institutions, that kind of thing, where they're dealing with people who are vulnerable because they're down on their luck, they have substance abuse issues, that kind of thing. They're living in these facilities, are often being used to perform this type of labor. We saw that specifically in Birmingham, um, in really just a horrific case during the World Games. But I think also from an operational standpoint, and I know Noel can talk to this, and I'm only gonna talk about it briefly because I know Noel's probably chopping at the bit. But from a hospitality standpoint, there's the hospitality industry in the United States is really under a lot of pressure as it relates to human trafficking. Insurance has skyrocketed for the hospitality industry. Um, some insurance companies are saying, we'll continue to insure your property, but we're not going to insure you against claims related to human trafficking. There have been, you know, judgments against some of these properties for hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I think hotels are starting to become a little bit, not all, obviously, but some are beginning to be a bit more conscious, and there's more outreach. Um, Noel and I are both involved in some of this work, but what we're seeing is an increase in the use of Airbnbs, VRBO, or I guess it's called Verbo, but Verbo, Airbnb, um, because they don't, um, they're more anonymous, right? They provide an extra layer of privacy and anonymity rather than a hotel. But that also kind of creates unique challenges for law enforcement as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
No.
sorry. No, I was going to say, just to echo what Doug's seen out there, you've got these tailwinds that are helping the counter trafficking movement. You've got the class action litigation, which he mentioned against several of the franchisee and franchisor holders of these hotels. They got completely raked over the legal coals because they chose to look the other way when people were commenting on Yelp, hey, human trafficking is occurring at this location. Someone needs to do something about it. And so the stance of most industries prior to, I would say, the last 6 months has been whoever's on the other side of the door or bank account or whomever, it's not really our business. But now they are making it their business. So we're seeing a huge positive movement in the right direction on that, more willingness to talk to NGOs, more willingness to adopt technology. So that's really, a great tailwind into the counter trafficking efforts. The other thing that we're seeing in Vegas is a cross collaboration between some of the gaming, hospitality, and live events. They're all starting to agree, hey, the risk is too high to have human trafficking. And there's usually now someone that's been trained by all the organizations, represented here, where now they're passionate about doing the right thing, and that starts to uh, influence the culture. And so now we're seeing that, top level executives are saying, yeah, this is part of our uh, corporate social responsibility. It's the right thing to do. How can we come together, even with competitors or other adjacent industries, to share this information? And then the third, I think, just with all the awareness that has been put out over the last decade, people intuitively know about human trafficking. 10 years ago, when you talked about human trafficking, people's eyes would glaze over and they wouldn't know exactly what you were talking about. And now everyone has some conception of it, right or wrong, from the movies and the work that we're doing, but they know what you're talking about. And I think that now that people are aware, we can start putting action plans together. So we've got all of these things that are kind of pushing. I think now's the time and the point of history that we really can start to change the tide and shift those numbers down by collectively pushing into solution-based responses.
Yeah, so I think, there's pros and well, there's always pros with awareness and more awareness and so forth and trainings. But they can be unexpected or you know, not necessarily what we expect as a consequence of those. So for example, yes, if you take the hotel industry, in Florida, we passed House Bill 851, which was great. So now hotels are required to train some of their personnel. Um, but we also see a shift now, as Doug mentioned, the trafficking numbers as far as what's being reported in the hotels has gone down, and we see more residential numbers popping up for that. And it's like Backpage, when Backpage was shut down, that was great, but then people went on the dark web or places where it wasn't as easy for law enforcement to catch it. And as you said, Noel, I mean, I was at a hotel um on I Drive in Orlando, and you know, we don't always have to be trained. We're not law enforcement. We're not the investigators, but if we see something that's off, we can still report it. And the nice thing was when I reported it to the hotel staff, they had just had a training. So, I'm at a friend's birthday party. I'm not trained. I don't need to do the recognizance work. When I see something, I can just report it. Now it's on them, right, to kind of monitor this situation. And then they can, report to the authorities if they see something that's going on. And so it goes back to, if you see something, say something, whether you know it, whether you suspect, or know it's trafficking or not. You don't always have to be the one who has the yes or no, because sometimes it's a gray issue. It's not always black and white. And so yeah, we definitely see some of those shifts. And for a while, we saw that hotels were either compliant or complacent when it came to trafficking. And now that we see that they're getting on board, and of course, those lawsuits probably help. Sometimes people don't listen until it affects their pocketbooks. So those are definitely great points to make. Um, so I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the traffickers' tactics, or some of the trends. So we talked a little bit about that, but can you share some of the examples of successful prevention or intervention efforts that have been tied to major events? So that might be a great question for you, Doug. What did you find that worked well in your efforts? And then Noel, if you have any, and then Claudia, if you have anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, we really began, like I said, we began long before the games took place because we wanted to get this issue out in front of the public, in front of the stakeholders, begin interviewing people. We worked very closely with the media, and especially within, for about a year leading up to the games, we kept human trafficking in the news cycle. So people were constantly aware. We did a lot of signage, a lot of billboards, that kind of thing. But we also educated, it was over 80 over 80 hotels in the area, provided training for them. Um, we provided um, training for every credentialed paid event staff and volunteer for the World Games. So I think there were 3,500, 4,000, something like that, paid event staff and volunteer staff. Every single one of them had to go through human trafficking training. We had our local hotline number for the World Games printed on their credentials. It was on their wristbands. They didn't have to look, to where to find anything. Um, and I think it was really just it was a combination of those things. It was partnering with our nonprofit, our NGO partners, our advocates, the hospitals, that really that really helped us to build an ecosystem, an anti-trafficking ecosystem around the World Games that we wouldn't have been able to do on our own. But it really it paid off. The labor trafficking case that I mentioned, that proved that was like the best proof of concept ever. Um, we got a call into our command center one day from a doctor that had an urgent care clinic, and the doctor calls our hotline and she says, "I think I have a trafficking victim in my office." So we respond. Well, we get there and we find out that the doctor was a medical staff member for the World Games and had gone through our training. So she had our number and everything on her lanyard. Everything was sitting right there in her bag in her office. The the victim herself, as part of her job, she had gone into a restroom and saw one of the posters that we had put in the restroom specific to the World Games. And she realized when she said, when I looked at that, I realized that this is what was happening to me. So she pretended to be ill so that her handlers would take her to the doctor. They just happened to take her to a doctor who was a paid event staff member. And so the signage obviously worked.
Mhm.
The education to the event staff worked, and we were able to close the loop, based on those things.
That's awesome. Yeah. Noel or Claudia, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've seen very successfully done is using the ads themselves that the traffickers
Hmm.
post, and then kind of reverse tracking that to either find the survivor or find the human trafficking network behind it. And so there's a lot of ways that technology has been used on the digital front, and it was mentioned that, they don't have to be physically present to be recruited. They also don't have to be physically present to be trafficked. They could be on the circuit. The survivor could be posting their own, information, but all of these are breadcrumbs that can be used by law enforcement and others to find it. And now we're seeing hotels adopt, camera technology to see if, a missing person or someone that's suspected of being a trafficker or being trafficked is coming through a hotel. So some of our, sister portfolio companies are working on that problem set and seeing some wins there. But I think to Doug's point about these types of events is if the organization is willing to collaborate and the technologists and the NGOs and law enforcement, it is the prime opportunity to show collaboration in
Hmm.
full force and the power of multiplication if everyone specializes. Hey, we're the tech part and Doug is law enforcement and Claudia is the NGO side, and we all come together, and we've got these strengths. We can share information, we can share tools and collaborate and kind of even set aside our differences for one day. It's a really powerful uniting forcing function to see the value of what can happen in a collaborative environment.
Awesome.
And on this, I would like to add that yes, collaboration I think is the key for any intervention. And when we talk about human trafficking and other safeguarding aspect, it's quite difficult to say has it been successful because we're measuring something that did not happen. So and also data are very rarely collected, or they're just starting to be collected around this subject, this topic, and categorized as well, because sometimes they are all put in the same box, like exploitation contains a lot of things, human trafficking contains a lot of things. So there is that skills that is needed to diversify, categorize the type of trafficking and exploitation, to then see what meaningful intervention has taken place. And what's important when we want to measure success is perhaps asking ourselves what condition made an intervention possible, and can we replicate those conditions to other events. So what's replicable, what are the lessons learned, and what can we take away to make it successful again. Um, with regards to some of the things that are available, I just wanted to mention that with my team at the Center for Sport and Human Rights, we are developing a tool for assessing what instruments an organization have to identify, prevent, and respond to different safeguarding concerns, including human trafficking. And we're piloting at the moment with some host city of the FIFA World Cup, and that will be made available for free after we finish piloting it. So all of you could have access to the tool. And also, one of the other positive things is that human rights requirements and safeguarding requirements are now part of bidding. So when host cities or country are bidding for a um, event, they are often required to include safeguarding commitments and human rights commitments. And this is also part of the ISO 2021, I think 24, that's been just updated. So that's a tool that assess sustainability at event, and safeguarding requirements have been added, and human rights requirements have been added to that to showcase how sustainable an event is. So that is also a positive tool that events are required to use. And also, I think one of the things that I've seen increasing is the inclusion of commitments from the host city committee or the event organizer to uh, ensure that support is available to survivors in an accessible way. There are different networks that are being mobilized, and I would like to say funded, but that's not quite there yet. So they're being mobilized and probably being asked to mobilize for free, unfortunately. Um, but these support networks are required to be gender sensitive and ensure that they operate with safety, dignity, and autonomy, which is very, very important for survivors. So there is again a shift towards this good practice that I've seen happening. Campaign and awareness raising, not just where the event is happening, but also in other countries, because people are being trafficked from other countries as well. As I mentioned before, athletes being trafficked. So awareness raising in the recruitment country, let's say, or where people are being recruited for trafficking. That is something that is happening and is very important. But also, we cannot just have awareness raising without a system for referral and response. So sometimes awareness raising only can be actually harmful. So it needs to go hand in hand with an effective referral and responsive mechanism that is ready to pick up concerns that are identified. So it's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. So yes, and at legislative level, I have seen this conversation happening at UN bodies, at legislative government level. So there is an interest in creating legislation, directive recommendations that are in line with protection of people being trafficked rather than criminalization of people being trafficked. And again, there's a lot of work to be done there, but there is some good discussion happening.
Thank you. And I just want to piggyback on that. There is an app, it's free, and it's something anyone can use. You don't necessarily have to be at a big event or a sporting event or a large event. It's called Trafficking, and you can take a picture of your hotel room. It's uploaded to a database, and that's also used to help identify victims of trafficking or exploitation. And it's helpful for law enforcement. And Claudia, you make a great point, and that actually segues us into our next question. And I do want to allow time for our audience to ask questions. So if anyone has a question, please put it in the Q&A. But if we can just take a couple minutes, because of all this awareness, because there is increased in law enforcement and so forth, and more victims are identified, and maybe coming out of a trafficking situation. What does meaningful support look like for these survivors who are identified during or after these events? Because from what I've been told by some of the service industry or service providers, it's a challenge for them because they may not always have the funding or the capability to handle the influx of survivors. And then are we also have services available for male survivors, not just female survivors? Because oftentimes a lot of the houses or, the services are only geared towards females. So would anyone like to address that issue?
I think that's why collaboration is so important.
Yeah.
And planning, is so important. I know, I mean, we just in Birmingham, I mean, we had, I mean, even prior to the World Games, we had a great relationship with our service providers, and they all participated in us or with us, in this event very, very closely. Um, but again, it's thinking outside the box too. It's not just the NGOs and the nonprofits. It's also it's also the hospitals, getting the emergency rooms, getting the in Birmingham, not only did we have UAB Hospital and the other hospitals, but we had Children's Hospital um, involved in case we had minor victims, which we did. Um, and so we had everybody, working together. I know one of our service providers, one of our partners actually created a website for the World Games, where all of the non-law enforcement partners could go in and register to say, this is what we're doing this is when we're available. So we had a schedule. Like we knew exactly who to call, when to call, so that we had services there, the entire time. I mean, there was never we were never left scratching our head wondering who are we going to call? Who can we ask for help? We had that nailed down from the very beginning, but you can't do that at the last minute, because the vast majority of your service providers, they're volunteers. They have other jobs, careers, families, that kind of thing, and so there's some intentionality that goes into this process. But the more people that you can get, and the right people, trained people working together, that just it increases the amount of resources that you have.
And like Claudia mentioned, maybe we have the host cities or the committees responsible. I mean, this is bringing in, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, millions of dollars in, right? And so could some of that fund, because some of that money go to help support survivors of human trafficking and the services that they need. I'm not sure if there's a fund set up for that or not. Um, but something to think about. So I actually have a question for Noah. Where are the traffickers able to post to buyers? So I guess maybe they're asking where the traffickers post the advertisements for the women, men, boys, girls. at some of these events?
So just to clear up one of the myths around this, everyone thinks this is on the dark web. Oftentimes, this is right out there in the open on the clear web that there's specialty advertising sites for commercial sex. After Backpage was shut down, there was a splintering and 10 more sites appeared. And they've all got kind of specific remits of how they advertise, but the basics of it is this is on traditional websites that anyone can access. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to promote specific in this forum, but for everyone's awareness and knowledge, they occur right out there in the open. And then kind of second layer down would be closed Facebook groups or Instagram or
Mhm.
Snapchat or social media where this is occurring in more closed and trusted circles. And then a very, very small percentage, it does happen in the dark web, but it is very small compared to, I would say 99% of this or 95% of this is probably happening right in the open web and right in plain visibility. And one of the ways that we see this is with illicit massage, and it's a mix of labor trafficking into commercial services where there isn't freedom of movement, all the things that you would kind of imagine, and labor trafficking. And a lot of times these are in cities where there's, live sporting events. And so those can be another angle that are also those services will be advertised on these types of sites in addition to the in-call services, meaning that the survivor is going to visit the buyer themselves. And so it can take a lot of forms online, but most of it is right out in the open.
So thank you for clarifying
I
that.
used to keep a running count, and I haven't updated it in a while. But just looking, I've got over 30 websites or apps that can be accessed by anybody
Yeah.
used to purchase sex. Just, I mean, much like you would place an order on Amazon or for a pizza.
Mhm. And the
Um,
flip side of that is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Claudia.
Sorry, I just wanted to add also that sometimes these recruiters work in subtle ways. So the grooming mechanisms is very hidden. Like you don't often recognize that you've been groomed. Especially a lot of my work has been with children, so a lot of children get groomed through video games as well. Somebody is playing with them, and they may say, "Oh, I give you these gems or ammunitions or whatever to get to the next level," and then the child will own something to the trafficker exploiter that they don't know is a trafficker exploiters, and it goes on and on and on and say, "Send me pictures," then we meet, then all of that, and that's how it happens. So it's not specifically a advert. It can be done very subtly, very deceitful way online. And unfortunately, when you're a minor, or even an adult, you may not be able to recognize those signs and get just into the exploited net.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate what our kids are exposed to sometimes, and obviously they can be exploited online, but we also see where it could go the other way, where they become the buyer. And there was a case where there was a 15-year-old and they were doing a sting operation, and when they had apprehended him, he actually took an Uber to during the Super Bowl to buy sex, and he said he had been watching so much porn, it wasn't enough for him anymore. And so yeah, so that's like another side of it. And then I just want to go back real quick to what Noel was talking about with the illicit massage businesses. My sister is she has her own massage business, and she tried to put a legitimate ad on Craigslist. and she had to take it down because she was getting so many, illegitimate requests or, inappropriate comments and requests for her massage business. She ended up having to take it down. But so we have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to end on this note. If we could just each take a minute and talk about what can everyday attendees or community members do if they suspect trafficking. I know we didn't really talk a lot about the signs, so if there's anything you want to highlight there, but we also have them available on our website. So if you're not that familiar with the issue, you can check out some more information on there. But yeah, what do you suggest? What would be your recommendation for the general community to be able to address this issue?
I would say the first thing, first and foremost, is to get educated. Learn from your website, from others, what trafficking is. We spend so much time having to re-educate people because they've been miseducated through the media. They conflate human trafficking and human smuggling. They think that human trafficking only takes place overseas or only at airports or it only involves foreign nationals or whatever. And that's not the case, right? Learn what it is. Um, Learn the signs, but again, don't get fixated on a list of indicators, right? Because that doesn't really tell the whole story. Just because a woman has tattoos doesn't mean that she's a trafficking victim. It's the totality of the circumstances. I think, honestly, in my opinion, um, I think we need to spend more time educating people to the vulnerabilities that lead people into trafficking. And if we could get people, the public, to better understand those vulnerabilities and to identify those vulnerabilities, we could do much better at preventing trafficking in the first place.
Great point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll go a different route with this. And it was mentioned that a lot of the grooming occurs online on video games of children. I think Doug and Claudia are probably, and also Christine are the best to talk about when you see the signs publicly, this is how you respond. I would say, it starts with a conversation around the dinner table about the platforms that our children are playing on and being aware of those platforms, spending time gaming with them, and getting to know that and giving them a safe space to talk about potential grooming tactics. I think we're going to see a lot more of that on the rise. And for participants, that's probably the way, tonight that you can help fight exploitation and this grooming is by having that uncomfortable conversation around the dinner table.
Yes. Thank you. Definitely. It starts at home.
And
Claudia?
just one thing, because I know we're running out of time, it would be probably to know your referrals route. So know who to refer to in your city. So find out the telephone numbers, the websites, so that if you spot the sign, you can refer on. Maybe don't approach them because they may put the victim or survivors more at risk. So yeah, but just get informed who to contact if you suspect that something is not quite right.
Yeah, great point. I mean, that there is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. But sometimes there's long wait times, they can't always answer or respond right away. So learning if is there a local hotline, or a statewide hotline that you can call is really probably your better bet. And if you are a service provider, if you're working with this, definitely collaboration is key. And learning who the key stakeholders are, whether you're in healthcare or the hotel industries and so forth, is so important.
Or
Well,
even
thank you.
911.
Well, yes, and if it's an emergency, definitely 911. Like I actually did have someone at the last conference say how they saw this girl run out of this car and like bolted towards a door in the neighborhood. And like that's a 911 situation right there, right? So definitely utilize that resource as well. Thank you so much, Doug. And thank you to everyone here. Thank you to Noel and Claudia for sharing all your expertise. Thank you for all the work that you do. to help address this issue. And thank you to all our participants who took the time out of their busy schedules to join us today and really learn more about this issue. And we look forward to you having us join us at future webinars, and we look forward to any resources that our speakers can share with you that you will be receiving shortly there in the next day or next couple days after this webinar. So have a great day, everyone. And we're getting a lot of hearts, so
Thanks.
take care.
Bye-bye.